We are here with the course American Literature, and in American Literature, today we are going to discuss Robert Frost. He is really a great poet in the history of American poets and American poetry in general. I hope so that students from all universities in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and around the globe who are reading this course of American literature would really enjoy this video lecture, because you cannot understand a piece of poetry without going through the poet itself and who he was and what message he had in his mind and which type of life circumstances he faced that led him to produce that particular piece of poetry. So, in order to have a real understanding of the piece of poetry, you must be familiar first with the works, with the ideologies, with the life circumstances that he went through. Because without knowing fully and being in contact with the poet, you cannot understand well his works and his poetry, especially. So, Robert Frost is a very famous poet who born in San Francisco in California, one of the famous and one of my favorite states in United States of America. He was born in 1874 and died in 1963. So it's almost the same age when Dr. Iqbal, the poet of East, was born in 1877, just 3 years after the birth of Robert Frost. So they have the similarities. I'm not sure whether they met with each other or not. But Robert Frost was born at the ending decades of 19th century in 1874. So this was an age when United States of America was not like a superpower and the status that it has internationally now. It was going through ages, and it was going through many conflicts like African American issues and like many complexities of racism, and then the cause of Negroes, and then the Civil War, and then the McCarthyism, and so many things during the age of Robert Frost that the United States of America went through. Here is a picture of Robert Frost. So, if you look very close to the picture of Robert Frost, what do you feel? The clouds behind him, and there is a ripeness of thought if you observe his face. He's not just a gloomy or a sad person. Even at his old age, he was working in his farm, and there is a ripeness of his thought, as we shall later on discuss in this video. So he is Robert Frost. And if you want to see him speaking and reading his reciting his poetry, you can watch on the YouTube where Robert Frost came in inauguration ceremony of American President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, where he recited his memorable poem on the request of the President of America. So it was a great honor for him to be there in the inauguration ceremony. So this shows that how a great American president gave a privilege to a poet to come on inauguration ceremony and recite his poetry. This is how the today a developed country like United States of America gave this type of importance to its poets. Anyhow, let's go ahead. So, Robert Frost has a very tough time at his early age. He used to deliver newspaper. He was a sale boy who used to sell and deliver newspaper at houses. He also worked at a factory, and he couldn't continue his studies at Harvard University and left Harvard University due to illness during 1897 and 1899. So he could not complete his studies at Harvard, but a lot many universities around the globe gave him honorary degree. So you are doing MA English or MPhil English in literature and doing your PhDs on Robert Frost. but he himself had no degree such that he went through continuous attending the classes and having good grades, not at all. So many great poets and literature and the people like him, they didn't complete their degrees, but you people now cannot complete your degrees without going through them. So this is how there is a difference between personal knowledge and the degrees that you have. So in 1912 he moved to Great Britain. So this was his another exposure on the other side of Atlantic Ocean, that he moved from America to England, Great Britain, and there obviously he would be there in the company of many great British poets and the thinkers and philosophers and the great scholars of that time. So this also enriched his minds, his thoughts, and his ideas. In England, he met Edward Thomas, T. Helm, Ezra Pound, and he met with these great figures of that time. So he had various jobs like delivering newspapers and going to factory. In England, as you know, that this was the good age in England regarding the writings and the things like that. He published his two successful volumes of his poetry. He published two books of his poetry. The first one was A Boy's Will, that he published in 1913, and the other was North of Boston, that he published in 1912. And during the First World War, he returned to United States of America. So the same year, you know, that the First World War broke in 1914, when he published his second edition of his poetry, second volume, sorry, of his poetry, and then he returned back to United States of America. He bought a farm at New Hampshire that is called Summer House, and this farm that he had bought is still there in the United States of America. And if you visit United States of America, if you go to America, do not forget to visit this place. This is now a museum today that is called the Frost Place and Poetry Conference Site. This is a site where the poets get together and they have conferences. So you know that the poets and the people like these giants, they like the natural places like this. They like these villages and these farmhouses. They leave these city lives and go at the deserted and isolated places. They feel calmness there. Their mind works best at such places, and they write wonderful pieces of poetry and the things like that. At this place, he wrote his famous poems Tree at My Window and Mending Wall. Both of these poems, I think, that you have been reading in your syllabus of MA English in American literature. So, these two poems he wrote here. Now, I am going to show you this farmhouse. Let's see. Wow, what a beautiful place it is. You can see there is written on the board, the Frost Place. So here is the place where Robert Frost used to live. What a beautiful farm to live in and to write poetry, actually. It's really wonderful, I think. So this is the place where Robert Frost used to live and write poetry. Here is another view, I think a snowy view of that Robert Frost place. There is a board that shows the introduction of Robert Frost. So this was in the New Hampshire, a beautiful farmhouse where Robert Frost used to live. If you go on YouTube and watch the videos how Robert Frost used to live at this farmhouse, and he was walking and moving with his animals which were there. What a beautiful description of nature. So you can imagine that Robert Frost used to live at such places, and he wrote wonderful poetry like Mending Wall and A Tree at My Window. So this is called the visual imagery. So visualize the things in your mind, get connected with the poet and with his work. Do not take it just something that you have to go through for your exams and marks and degrees, but try to connect yourself with this piece of poetry and the books and the poets like all this stuff. Feel it, make it a living thing, treat it like a living outcome of a living mind, of a brain, of a human brain. Give life to it. Look at it. If you zoom it out or in and look what how it plays, looks like. Look at these trees where Robert Frost used to walk. Be with it. Put yourself in this situation and feel the things like you are in. Don't make your studies a burden upon you. Always enjoy it. So, Pulitzer Prize for poetry was one of the greatest prizes in the United States of America for the cause of literary work. So he achieved 4 Pulitzer Prize for poetry. He was also a poet laureate of Vermont, that is in New England. It's a state in America, and the poet laureate means the official, the government, the official poet of a state who writes poetry for the official ceremonies like inauguration ceremony of president and things like that. Now, a wonderful thing about the poets and literary people, they were teachers. A teacher has a direct connection with human minds and brains. He works on human beings, not on machines. So he has got a direct relationship with human beings. So he worked as teacher of English language and sound effect in poetry. Wonderful things that how the sound make a magical effect in the poetry. Being a language teacher, he observed the things like that. He never graduated from any college. Wonderful thing. He never got a degree from any college, but he received honorary degrees from 40 universities, including Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. So, Oxford and Cambridge, two famous universities in England, and Harvard, the famous university in America. So, from both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, from America and UK, he got honorary degrees from 40 universities without being graduated from any college. He also got Congressional Gold Medal in 1960 by John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He was a very famous, extraordinary president in the history of presidents of United States of America. He made wonderful speeches. I really like him. I really listen his speeches, his oratory skills. And why Robert Frost was given this gold medal by an American president? In recognition of his poetry, which has enriched the culture of USA and the philosophy of the world. These are great words. So Frost poetry that you are reading in your university, in your courses, has enriched the culture of USA and the philosophy of the world. These are the words that President said. At the age 86, he read his well-known poem. This is the poem that he read in inauguration ceremony of JF Kennedy's presidential ceremony, where he recited his poem The Gift outright. You can watch this real video. It's available on YouTube during the JF Kennedy's time during 1961 to 63 as the 35th president of America. And after this ceremony, the 2 years after he died, and as he had a famous line in his poem, I had a lover's quarrel against the word. So I was against the word and I had a quarrel with the word that was like a lover's quarrel. So you can go into the depth of these lines, you can interpret it in your own way. So on his grave, these lines are written, are engraved on his grave on the tombstone. Here is a signboard that's showing that in this way, if you go, you will find the grave of Robert Frost. Here you can see the tombstone of Robert Frost's grave. You can see there is written, I had a lover's quarrel with the word. This is the grave of Robert Frost. So sad. So he left the word. We all have to leave this word. So he died. So the many great poets and literature, they left many things for us, and they left this word with so many books, with so many ideas. And people around the globe, whether they are reading in the University of Damascus They are reading in Aleppo, Cairo, and Punjab University, Islamic International University in Pakistan. It's maybe Islamic International University in Malaysia, or maybe in universities in Indonesia, in Cambridge and Oxford and Harvard. Around the globe, wherever you go, you will read Robert Frost in the Department of English Literature and especially in American literature. Greatest Muslim scholar in the United States of America, Hamza Yusuf, also variously quotes many times the words, the poetry of Robert Frost. And J.F. Kennedy also used to read the lines of Robert Frost at the end of stopping by words, what he said. Um, Although the woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So, before going to death, I have to do so many things. Before the night comes and I get sleep, I have to go far away. This was Robert Frost. Here is another aspect of Robert Frost. How was his family life? His father died when he was just 11 years old by TB, and his mother died of cancer. Wife died of breast cancer. So many tragedies. Tragedies have an impact on the life and mind of a poet. So Robert Frost, his younger sister, admitted in mental hospital and died 9 years later. His son died, committed suicide at 38 years old, Caro. His daughter died of perpetual fever at the age of 29. So these were the continuous sufferings and pains and tragedies. But Robert Frost was so brave, so courageous. He didn't put himself into depression and anxiety and suicide, not at all. He faced all this with courage. It enriched his mind with more mature thoughts and ripened ideas. So his daughter Marjorie died of perpetual fever. Then his daughter Eleanor died 3 days after the birth. And Lester and Irma outlived. Son Ilya died of cholera at age 8. So his son died, his sister died, his wife died. All the tragic deaths by TB, by cancer, the accidental deaths. In Frost's work, there is an. Here are some of the themes and ideas in Frost poetry. So, the important thing is, like other poets who are just overwhelmed by their emotions and feelings and their heart controls them, Frost was not like that. For Robert Frost, there was also the importance of mind, the importance of logic and reason and thought. So there is always a conflict between emotions, feelings, desires versus logic, reason, and intellect. So heart versus mind, you can say. But in Frost, the poetry creation was not just the overflow, the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, like William Wordsworth defined it. For Robert Frost, it was not like that. For Robert Frost, complete poetry is where an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found the words. When there is an emotion and it is ripened to a state when it is associated with a mature thought, emotion is not just overflowing in Frost poetry, but it's under a mature thought. And then, when emotion is under the thought and it finds suitable words, then it becomes poetry. The wonderful definition that Frost gave for poetry, and that's why there is always the importance of mind in his works. So, there comes his poetry that we shall read. In the next video, in the next lectures, we shall discuss all of his major works of poetry, which are included in the syllabus of many universities.